Welcome to TalkingPointz executive video. Today we're going to be talking with xUC CMOs. I've got an incredible panel here of talent and former CMOs from the UC industry. I will introduce you, and because we're on this video switching technology, you have to say something so that the camera switches over to you while I introduce you. So we'll start off here, going left to right. We'll start off with Chris Hummel. I've got Chris Hummel. Go ahead and say something, Chris.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Chris is joining us from a hotel room in Texas, I believe. You're on the road. Chris is currently the CMO at United Rentals. He was the CMO, originally hired as a CMO at Siemens Enterprise Communications. He was there from 2010 to 2013, left as the, I think it was a CCO was your final title when you left there?
Commercial officer, yeah.
In 2013, and during that time, you rebranded Siemens to Unify, which we know today, and you were also part of the original conception and launch of what became Unify Circuit. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Dave.
I've also got Andy Cunningham online here, and Andy, well, say hello.
Hi, Dave. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Great to see you. You're also in a hotel, I understand.
I am.
Traveling on the road. Very nice. You're obviously in California. The sun is shining. Let's see here. So Andy was at Avaya from 2014-2015 timeframe. You were actually kind of an unusual situation because you actually were not an employee of Avaya. You retained control of your current company, which was at the time formerly Series C, now Cunningham Collective. You specialize in marketing with a number of younger firms and startup firms, including back when Apple was a kind of a startup. Your claims to fame were the Avaya Stadium, which was part of your campaign to make Avaya more relevant in California, so particularly Silicon Valley. And also you created the Ava personality on Avaya, which I actually really enjoy Ava. And third, we've got Martyn Etherington. Say hello, Martyn.
Hey, Dave. How are you?
Very good. Good to see you. And you're on the road, but kind of at your office. Is that correct?
I'm in my office at Santa Clara, yeah.
Excellent. Your current office in Santa Clara is at Cisco because you had joined a CMO, Jasper, which was recently acquired. And you were CMO at Mitel 2012 to 2015. You were part of the rebranding of Mitel after the Astra acquisition of probably Mitel's largest marketing spend in its history, as I can recall. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right.
That sounds about right. Okay, so we're going to talk about UC and marketing in this conversation. We haven't coached anything. We haven't gone over any practice questions or anything. So this will be kind of a let's see how things unroll here. My first question for the panel is, in terms of marketing, would you say that the UC industry is somehow different or unique challenges? And if so, what about it? Who wants to start?
Well, maybe I'll start, Dave. The only thing that I would say is unique is there's a lot of elements of, obviously, marketing which stay the same in terms of looking at the customer journey, customer experience, buyer personas, right? Getting great content across, put the narrative about your company. But I think what's somewhat unique about unified communications is the fact that the way you communicate has to represent your brand. Since this is essentially a communications technology, right? It's a collaboration technology. I know when we were doing the launch of the Unify brand, for example, we thought about doing the traditional big B2B event, having everybody come in, and decided that, well, really that was not going to be appropriate given the industry that we were in, that we had to, in fact, market using the technologies that we actually have. And I think that's both a tremendous opportunity for those people who are still in unified communications and the broader sort of collaboration space, but it's also a challenge because if you don't live up to that, then you have the potential of looking very inauthentic.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that, Andy?
Sure, I'll add to that. I think the competitive landscape has gotten a whole lot more complex over the last several years, making it more difficult to differentiate product and to really get a customer to make a decision to move from the systems they have to another system. So it's just a more complex environment. Now we're competing with a lot of cloud-based systems. In many cases, we're competing with free. So I think it's just getting harder to do marketing.
Yeah, I think, Dave, I would also add that unified communications, it's not a term that's very well understood. Also, the value proposition is pretty not well articulated. And then also, thirdly, many of these solutions go through third-party vendors, VARs, resellers, integrators. So your message is somewhat get diluted through those channels. So it's really what Chris has spoke about, Andy, is this market is not very well understood. The terms we throw around jargon, we don't speak in the voice of the customer. We speak in vendor speak, and we've done a pretty bad job, I say, in really clearly articulating the value proposition the UC has with potential customers.
You bring up some interesting points, and let me ask you then, Martyn, about how important is the brand? I mean, you put a lot of effort into rebranding Mitel in particular, but if you're going through these other channels and these other providers, and the customers are not really familiar, they're going through. We'll touch on a little bit later this whole buyer's journey that everyone's talking about. How important is the brand? I mean, is it something that drives business or validates business?
I think a little bit of both. You've got two spectrums of the UC market. I think that the very high end, the Cisco's, the Microsofts, the Avayas, the Siemens, brand is critically important. I think brand's important per se, but at the lower end, when you're going through partners, brand is probably lesser the importance, more so that a lot of our customers in the small, medium businesses, when I was at Mitel, would buy from the distributors or resellers, and really they didn't know very much about unified communications, so they bought from the line card. So I think the brand is lesser, small to medium business, but still very, very important at the higher end part of the business, because nobody gets fired for buying Cisco, Microsoft, Avaya, or Siemens, big brand names.
Chris, you're the only one in this group that actually created a whole new brand from scratch. Martyn relaunched a brand, but kept the name Mitel. You got to create the whole thing from scratch. Tell me a little bit how much do you think brand was important to your buy? You were kind of forced into changing brand because of all the ownership changes and whatnot. Was that a relief or a benefit, or is that a liability? Put it that way.
Well, it's interesting to talk about the power of brand. Martyn continues to talk about Siemens, which doesn't exist in the unified communications world anymore, right? So the power of that brand, which has lasted for decades, still lingers on, right? So I would say that universally, it's not in all industries, but I think where, as Andy was saying, right, competition is becoming tighter and tighter. It's more difficult to differentiate between what Cisco has and what a good enough technology that's already come up and kind of mapping to it. I would say in general, when you look at it, I don't know that there's that much that's more important than brand. I mean, there's an economic value proposition that's been communicated, but it's sort of difficult to articulate and really get across. And then you have, there's a sales process, and you have different channels to reach customers, and you have new features coming out, but you have blurring lines between different industries. So is Slack a UC player, right, as hot as it is? Or is Zoom that we're using right now, right, is that a UC player? Or is it only the traditional people who have like the full gambit? So for us at Unify, I would say what we did was we took a situation, we took lemons and made lemonade. I mean, we were, when the company was, the joint venture was created, Siemens Enterprise Communications, and carved out of Siemens, it was known that there was a timeline that we were going to have to lose the name Siemens. Now, that doesn't mean that the brand was going to change. I mean, obviously, the corporate logo would change, the name would change, but didn't mean the brand. It just meant a renaming. And I think all of us, or any marketer worth their salt, would recognize there's a difference between name and corporate identity and your brand, right, your broader brand. And I would say in the Unify case, if, it's hard because I was the architect of the whole rebranding, so, it's going to sound a little arrogant, but I think it made the company relevant again. I mean, I think there was a point at which Siemens Enterprise Communications was dying. We were losing 10% revenue a year. We were less than 1% market share in the US. Even in our home market of Germany, we were getting beat by Cisco was coming in, right? Microsoft was coming in. In other parts of Europe, obviously Mitel had strength in the UK that we were fighting against in those key areas. So the brand suddenly made, Unify, the new entity, relevant. And it wasn't just because, okay, we put some cool new colors instead of having, green and gray and so on and so we had, blue and gray, we had now green and black and whatever else. We pivoted the entire company. We actually tried to get out of the whole category of unified communications. And if you remember, it was all predicated on the new way to work. So we were trying to hook into an editorial that was much bigger than the company, the category. And I think we succeeded in making ourselves relevant for about a year and a half. And then the reality of the brand of Cisco, the inability of Unify to capture on the vision that sort of came in originally Project Ansible and then Circuit in a fast enough time, the brand just, Cisco, Microsoft, to a lesser degree Avaya, really just started to pull away. And the company became irrelevant again in many ways.
I wasn't part of the inner circle at Unify or Siemens when the branding was happening. I didn't know the new name until you actually launched it. But I know some other analysts that did know the new name, and one of the analysts, very influential analysts, said to me, "It's going to be great." I can't tell you the name, but he was so excited about what was going to happen. So I think that validates some of what you're saying there. Now, Andy, you're the one who didn't get to change brand. I want to ask you, because the industry's been changing so much. Tell me about, does brand hurt you sometimes? I mean, for example, Avaya is really trying to move aggressively into networking. But it's probably largely associated with voice. And so tell me how brand can hold you back, or if it does hold you back. I mean, you also have the market leader brand. So
I do think, I agree with what was just said, that brand is really an important, very, very important thing in all kinds of selling, whether it's B2B or B2C. We actually coined a little phrase at Avaya that we called B2P, which was really business to people, to try to get everybody to recognize that even in a B2B situation, you are actually selling to human beings who care about brand, and they care about stories, and they care about customer service, and they care about those sorts of things. So what we did is we ended up reframing, if you will, the industry a little bit to talk about what the value of unified communications is. And the value in the way that we described it was all about engagement. So what we did is we sort of went to the third wave of the telecoms industry. The first wave, it was called telecoms, and that was really all about features. Then we moved to the second wave of telecoms, which was collaboration, which was all about the benefit of telecommunications and collaboration. And then the third wave is what we call engagement, which is really the value of the technology, because it's been proven over and over again that when people are engaged, they're more productive workers. And of course, in a call center environment, if you can engage your customer, you sell more stuff.
Yeah, I got to say, I was really impressed with the Avaya Stadium along those lines. You pass on the freeway, the signs to exit Avaya Stadium, and it became such a more common word and understanding, and then you were using your own technology there. I thought that was a pretty good way of engaging the people as opposed to just the CIOs or the potential targets. I thought that was really good.
It was so much fun. I have to tell you that doing a stadium, and soccer stadiums, of course, are not as expensive as football stadiums, but it was so much fun working with the Earthquakes, and they were such great partners. They still are great partners of Avaya. Using the technology and espousing the messages. It was just a really fun thing. And then the benefit was, of course, everybody in Silicon Valley now hears about Avaya Stadium all the time. So it was well worth it, I think.
Excellent. All right, let me change up to a concept.
Dave, if we go on there, I think I'd like to go back to the point that Chris raised about relevancy. And I think looking back at my journey at Mitel, and the part of the thing we had to be is more relevant to the market. So back in rewind back to end of 2012, Mitel were $450 million. Share price was $2.50. And we lacked relevancy in the market. But we were seen as this clunky provincial Canadian PBX vendor that lacked relevancy. And a lot of our business and a lot of our products were moving towards virtualization, and the cloud, yet the market still thought of us as that clunky PBX company. Our biggest challenge was to reset the market's perception, and also indeed our own channels and our own sales team's perception of who the new Mitel was and why we were relevant to the new modern buyer of Unify communications. So as Chris alluded to, repositioning, rebranding is hard work. It's fun. You have many near-life or near-career death experiences, but you get it right. And I think we've all experienced getting it right. It has potential to really uplift the company. I think we obviously made some big acquisitions. We went from $450 million to $1.3 billion. Our share price went up to 2015, $10.50. So not claiming that brand had all that impact, but it's certainly a major contributor to that success.
Okay. All right, Martyn, I want to stick with you for a second. We've talked about brand. We've talked about we've talked about differences in UC. The end thing right now is this concept of the customer journey or the buyer's journey. We keep on hearing it over and over, and how all the vendors in the UC space and probably other industries are adapting their marketing to accommodate the buyer's journey. The reason I'm targeting you on this is because you used to call this ZMOT, the zero moment of truth. I think that was one of your keynotes, as I recall. And so tell me how, the customers have always gone through a journey, and so sure, now the journey is a little bit more online than it used to be. Tell me how this is really impacting marketing.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of pontification about the new buyer journey, a lot of intellectual debate. It's pretty simple. We are all consumers. We all go through the same psychological steps to buy, whether it's a UC solution, whether it's a car, whether it's an iPhone. You want to find, learn, buy, and use. You want to find information about the brand, the product, or solution. And yeah, we refer to it as zero moment of truth, and that's really where you type in Unify Communications, Business Communications, and you've got to appear first. So that's fine. Then you've got to be relevant. You've got to have the relevant content at the right time of that journey to make sure you educate that provider, solution, that customer, to make them informed. And then eventually you want them to buy, not add to shopping cart, but make sure they've got all the information. They can make an informed buyer's decision. Peer references, fantastic for that. And then eventually, once they have the solution, they want to use it. And it's really incumbent upon all the brands and companies to ensure that their customers get the most of it. So a lot of intellectual debate, and it may not be linear, it may be iterative now, but find, learn, buy, and use is the 4 stages. A little different in terms of content you serve up to the different personas, but really the steps are very much the same, whether you're buying a house, an iPhone, or UC connection solution.
Martyn, at least for me, there's a little bit of a lag between your audio and your video. So it would be helpful if you could move your lips before you say something. That would be great. You should probably talk to Cisco about your networking over there. Come on, Dave. We're still in the Jasper networking here. So Andy, what are your thoughts on this buyer's journey? How is this really changing things?
So I think there are 2 things to think about as it relates to the buyer's journey to add to the conversation. The first thing is that people are learning everything that they need to know now online, whereas before they were learning it from different from salespeople and other things. So your digital footprint has to be huge online in order for you, and it has to be educational. It has to be differentiated and educational. So that's one part of it. But the second part of it is there's 2 buyer's journeys. One buyer journey is all about the new buyer, and that's being very well mapped, and I think there's great progress being made in how to do that. But the second buyer's journey is the rebuyers, right? The buying, coming back and buying more stuff, the same customer coming back and buying more stuff. I don't think enough work has been done on that buyer's journey anywhere in the industry, because once we sell stuff into a customer, we just expect they're going to keep buying the same stuff.
Yeah, you always hear this. Recurring, the existing customer is the least amount of work, but somehow that's turned into no amount of work, right?
Exactly, it's turned into no amount of work, and I think that's a big mistake because once you have a customer, whether you're buying Zappos from Zappos or Nordstrom, or you're buying from the grocery store, if you get that customer and you do the right things with that customer, you can always go back and sell more stuff. But that buyer's journey has not been mapped.
Chris, what do you think Andy means when she talks about her digital footprint? What comes to your mind when you hear that?
Well, I mean, this concept of the buyer's journey and the customer life cycle is like discovering that exercising and eating healthy is going to help you, get fit and trim. Oh my God, is that a surprise? But it's something we've been doing for a long time. What's happening though is exactly like she said, is now you can track what the buyer is doing more, right? So there's always been a buyer's journey. Now the buyers are smarter, so they're doing more of it self-service. They can find the information themselves. We as companies can actually see more of what they're doing, which leads to all other kinds of challenges in terms of security and Big Brother and privacy and all that. But also the decision-making unit is broadening, right? It used to be like, okay, yes, you go to references like Martyn was talking about, or you would go to people inside your organization. Then you would maybe go to industry associations. Now you can almost network anywhere, right? You can find voting, you can find information, you can find reviews on products, on anything else. So all of a sudden the buyer is actually more armed usually with information than the sellers are, right? Any individual seller. So what ends up happening is you have to look at the buyer's journey. And actually this is something as relevant to United Rentals where I am now, where we're trying to disrupt our own market, where we're the leader, as it is, I think, in this UC space, which is you can use it at sort of what I call tier one level, which Martyn was talking about, sort of find, try, buy, learn. Okay, and then you map what activities you do within there. Then there's another level where you start to go, okay, I'm going to look at the decision pathway. I'm going to really look at how they make the decision. And is it any different between industries? Is it any different between, large buyers versus smaller buyers or existing buyers in this kind of repeat, remarket buy or versus new customers or whatever. But the third one, which I think is the most interesting and gets into something where, again, as I sort of open the conversation, UC is in a very specific place, is when you start to use the buyer's journey to identify not just obvious stated needs, but latent needs, right? Which basically is something that we marketers, name as something that the customer really cares about but doesn't know it. And if we as suppliers can identify that latent need, which is exactly what we tried to do with Project Ansible, now Circuit, at the time with Unify, we opened up an entire new approach, an entire new solution, an entire new way of looking at the problems that often leads to the major disruptions. And this is something why UC, again, is so specific, is because UC is a technology that companies are going to use to meet the buyer in the different points on that journey, right? Whether they're the moments that matter or the whatever you want to call them, moments of truth. UC is going to be the thing that helps companies like mine, which are not in the UC space, meet our customers in that digital world or even in that physical world. We can't control their journey, but at least if I find the points where I need to map to them, I can go in and I can provide service, information, whatever, to kind of get them. So I think it's not new, but what's new is the empowerment of the buyer. And in many ways, if we do it right, the empowerment of the solution provider, right? To actually bring a solution that adds even more value to the customer.
Okay. So now I'll go back to Andy here because the buyers are everywhere. We've got all this information going out there, this complex buyer's journey, and Chris, you're talking about all these different people out there that are looking at this information. Who do you market to then? Do you market to the CIO or are you marketing to individual users? This is what Andy was talking about, B2P. Andy, who are you marketing to now?
Well, I think that's one of the complexities that have occurred in this marketplace. We're now marketing to a whole bunch of different people, including, by the way, the CMO, us, because the buyer's journey, as you accurately pointed out there, is all happening with our technology, right? So with the Unified Communications technology. So we actually can reach buyers through the CMOs at companies for the Unified Communication stuff. So I unfortunately, there's a lot of buyers, and that's an unfortunate thing. I mean, it's heads of units, it's heads of business. We found at Avaya, it could be somebody running a remote office. It could be a CTO. It could be the CFO. Sometimes it's the CEO. Sometimes it's the chief marketing person. Sometimes it's somebody way beneath all of that. So it's that's what makes marketing even more difficult in this environment.
Okay, Martyn, you were actually the only one that actually had a direct cloud business. Does that change your marketing? Because you were targeting to line of business managers, or could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think there's two ways we marketed both then. Also now here at Cisco Jasper is we've got the push and the pull. The push is really working through your channel. Our channel then was the resellers. About 80 to 90% of our business then was through resellers. So we were trying to enable them, push content, enable them to sell to their customers. The pull was driving that umbrella brand awareness, if you will, of our value proposition, that we can actually pull the customers back and through the resellers. So that was really our model, and it is complex because you're trying to sell to an end user customer, or in fact customers, as Andy said. These are not anymore just by individual personas. They're what we call by teams. They could be mixtures, particularly in enterprises. They could be procurement, CIO, CFO, CTO, CMO, business unit, general manager. And then also you've got choosers and approvers and users, or a mixture of all of those at the enterprises. Small, medium businesses, the end user or the CEO could also be the CIO of that small business. So you've got just a real complexity of people you had to market to, and also doing that via a pipe, which is the channel.
Yeah.
The UC industry has lots and lots of players and three giants: Avaya, Microsoft, and Cisco. So to Chris and Martyn, when you're dealing with giants or Goliaths, is it better to be as good as in your messaging or different? That's the first question. And then to Andy, is it better to be a giant, or are you trying to kind of be more? Are you trying to position yourself as not a giant? And I've seen some messaging from a lot of big companies where it seems to be like it's not in to be big. And so let's start off with Chris.
So when we were at Siemens Enterprise Communications at the time, and hopefully I'm not giving away any super secret information, we used to be one of the giants, right? We used to be one of the three giants a decade ago, 15 years ago, and lost that spot essentially. And so when the new team came on and Gores came in to create the joint venture with Siemens to look at building this business up, we had a choice. We had a choice, which was, do we go try and be as big as the giants or big enough? We thought our technology was great. We thought we had some problems on user interface and all that, but technology-wise, we could stack up with anybody. We needed to fill in some gaps. So the strategy there would have been fill in some technology gaps, video, a couple other places where we didn't quite have the strength, and bulk up through acquisitions, right? So we looked at a whole bunch of different players in the space, and essentially what we decided was that really was going to be a riskier strategy, because actually to do that, by the time we got there and did that and integrated all those companies, hopefully for those companies, not for us, they would have moved on, right? Cisco, Avaya, Microsoft would have come up with something else. They would have sort of moved on, and we would have been stuck in taking all the legacy acquisitions and rolling them up and spending all our time kind of doing that. So partially it was also a very expensive strategy, right? Cash-wise, it was a very expensive strategy. So the other strategies we looked at, do we become a low-cost player? And with all due respect, sort of there were other players in the space who were playing that low-cost, good enough space. Okay, we really couldn't go there. Could we go a regional strategy play? Could we be the European leader, which we sort of were? And we said no, because there's something special about the American market in a technology market, that if you're not relevant in America, you don't need to be the leader, but if you're not relevant, your strength will erode in Europe or in Asia, right? Without some foothold in the US. So that was going to be a tough one for us. And then the third one was to go to a vertical specific strategy and actually make UC less of a kind of, for us at least, a horizontal play and make it a vertical play. And if you look at the history of the last couple of years of Unify, we chose none of the above. And what we did instead was try to essentially continue in the category, good enough, fight with the strengths that we had, the technology, and essentially try and pivot. Try and use, as we talked a little about earlier, try and use brand and innovation to outflank what we thought was a market that was ripe for disruption, but nobody else was really disrupting, because the larger players were, it's not that they weren't doing interesting things with technology, right? But they were sort of serving their base and gradually moving forward. We thought there was a massive leapfrog we could make. And so we tried to execute that strategy. And that was a very risky strategy, because if we missed, we failed. Or if we hit it, but we couldn't deliver, we failed. And so, the jury's still out as to whether they can deliver or not. But, we essentially, it's a long answer, sorry, but to your short question, which was, we essentially decided we could not be just another big player. We wanted to be big enough, but that we had to find another angle, and we were going to hit them sideways and just change it.
Okay. Martyn, Andy, I hope you're still there.
Yeah.
So Martyn, how did you stand out against the giants?
I think.
Let me rephrase that. What was your strategy to stand out against the giants?
I think a couple of things. One was our channel. Our install base, and we also had geographic presence too. I think the biggest thing we did was really transform our business towards software as a service in cloud, and we did a number of things. We whether it's forward planning, or we got lucky, or a combination of both, with virtualization. I think we virtualized a lot of our software 3, 4, 5 years ago, and really just hit the cloud software as a service wave just spot on. And the other thing that we did was we started to break out our cloud business. So the quarterly reports, you still see it now from Mitel, is we speak about the number of seats, the ARPU, the growth we have there, and laid claim to having the number one space within cloud business communications. Whether right, wrong, and different, whether you can really defend that, we claimed it. So that's really became our differentiator. And then we were known as the cloud provider for business communications. So that was really part of our differentiating strategy there and then.
Andy, you spent almost your entire career working with companies that don't have a known brand, and this Avaya stint was really this one time where you were one of the market leaders. What side of the table do you prefer?
Well, I think there's an advantage to both sides, and both are fun actually to work with. If you're a giant, the advantage is you can reframe an entire industry. And that's really what we were trying to do at Avaya, is to move the industry from collaboration to engagement. And that's a lot of fun, because there's thought leadership associated with that, products associated with that. It's a big thing, and it's a lot of fun. If you're a smaller player and not a giant, then you can do what Chris just said, and you can talk about, Martyn just said, and you can talk about differentiation. So I think both are incredibly, incredibly fun, but doing a pivot is a very challenging thing. So you kind of have to, if you're going to do a pivot, you have to do either the reframing the industry while you're pivoting if you're a giant, or the differentiation while you're doing the pivot if you're a smaller company. So pivots are hard in this industry, very, very hard. And the bigger you are, the harder it is.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, so the industry as a whole and all of your previous employers are going through these transitions. The first one was from hardware to software, and the second one that's happening now is from software to services. How does that impact the marketing equation? I mean, services, one thing they say about services is you have to earn your keep every day, as opposed to the big capital purchase. And so Andy, why don't you go ahead and jump on this one? How does the service equation, and Avaya is moving into, you got this relationship with Google going on. You're moving into a variety of different services into supplying service providers. How does that change the equation in marketing?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is everybody is doing it, right? You have to do it one way or another. So even if it's hard, you have to make it happen. And relationships with incumbents in the as a service space like Google are critical to make that kind of a transition happen. But from a marketing perspective, it's no longer one and done, right? You no longer get somebody hooked on your product and then you can move on to the next customer. As you pointed out, it is an ongoing, it is a marketing job that actually now has to involve other departments in the company, especially sales and customer service. Those are two other departments that now have to work hand in hand with marketing, because now marketing in an as-a-service world is as my old boss used to say, it's a process, not an event anymore. And you have to keep it going every day with many different departments. So a lot more, quote, collaboration now has to happen inside the company between and among departments.
Chris, what about you? And you know, you were there during the creation of what became Circuit. What does a company have to change in marketing, from a marketing sense, to become a service provider?
Well, in some ways, it plays right into marketing's hands, right? As Andy was just talking about, now all of a sudden, you know, she was saying it very diplomatically, but what's happening is what have been the purview of sales and service are suddenly being, they're either coming into the marketing space because they need the tools, right, to do this, or marketing is kind of stepping in their space, if you want to look at it from an internal kind of organizational standpoint. But essentially what it is along that continuum from product to kind of software to service or solution, really what you're doing is you're moving the brand from what to why, right? You're moving from a rational discussion of what is the value we provide, what is the line, you know, cost per line or whatever, and then elevating it to really talk about from, you know, sort of how you can bring it in emotionally and how you can connect people emotionally with what you're doing, show them the value of what they're actually getting rather than just the thing that they're getting. And the challenge then comes often is, you know, how do you charge for this, right? It's not just like the connection is not necessarily the source of value that you can judge against. So some of the challenges, both for incumbents and for new players, is going to be if you're moving from what to why, but you're charging still based on what, there's a disconnect that goes back to your brand, that goes back to your customer experience, it goes back to all those things we talk about. So what do, right? How do you charge? And that's a big pricing and charging and value and all that become the next hurdle of challenges.
And Martyn, you must have been a little schizophrenic at Mitel because you had both businesses kind of supposedly being equally prioritized. How did that change your marketing strategy as far as services versus product?
Well, the way we got around that was really putting the choice to the customer. And we didn't force our customers either to a premise-based solution, to a cloud solution, or even a hybrid. We work with the customers and work with our channel partners to really understand the needs of the customer to suit their needs. And we could provide a premise-based solution. We could provide a standalone cloud solution or a hybrid, but doing it really and have the customer lead you. And I see so many customers or vendors trying to force solutions down the customer's throats, and we certainly didn't want to do that. We want to be far more customer-centric. But moving from hardware to software to services has its own internal challenges. Now, those companies that are born on the web and born in the cloud, the RingCentrals, the 8x8s, they have a lot easier. Now, if you're grown up selling capital-based equipment, moving to subscription, you've got to time the business, that sort of teeter-totter of your hardware business, moving to a subscription business on a 3 or 4 year basis. Your mission plans change, your focus change, the way you present your value propositions to your customers change, your business model changes. So it's a very, very complex balance to make, both from a marketing perspective, from a brand perspective. I would dare say it's probably easier than the internal cultural and systems change you've got to go through, going from a premise-based to a cloud-based solution, unless, of course, you've grown up purely as a software as a service cloud vendor.
Okay. Very interesting perspectives. I'm going to switch over to something that you are all good at, social media. And you all, and I might be wrong about Hamid there at Unify, but you were all under CEOs that did not do social media, if I'm correct. And I just wrote a post about this on TalkingPointz about how a lot of UC CEOs are not active on social media. Tell me about why you're active on social media personally and how important you think it is for the UC companies and the UC leadership to be involved in social media. Let's start with Andy.
So I mentioned before something that I think is really important for brands to develop, and that is what I call a digital footprint. And digital footprints enable customers to learn more about your product, which is how they're finding out about stuff today. They go online, they search, they go to sites friends mentioned, they read blogs, they read Twitter. So if you're not on social media as a personal brand, or as a business brand, you're diminishing your digital footprint. So does it actually result in sales? No, but what it does is it increases the educational opportunity that you have to educate your customers.
Martyn?
Yeah, I think social is it's probably got a bad rap. I think social is as much listening to customers as communicating with them, and I think it's bi-directional. And then the other thing we did, particularly at Mitel, and we're doing it here again at Cisco Jasper, is really using the unedited voices and personalities of your employees. They are the best brand ambassadors that you've got, and I've been amazed both at Mitel now here at Cisco Jasper. You give them the tools, the enablement, take away the fear, let them have at it, and they will do miraculous things. So I think social is important for listening and communicating, but it also has byproducts too. It actually helps, believe it or not, with your search rankings. So something called social signals that Google builds into algorithms to affect the different place where you show up on search. So it's multiple dynamics, and unfortunately, not many people do it. And I think these guys do it. I've done it. And it's also very, very inexpensive compared with other traditional marketing methods.
Dave, can I add a point to that?
Please.
The point is that customer service is now hooked into social. Remember when I said everybody has to work together now like they didn't used to before? Now, if you have a problem with your phone and you're a user inside of an enterprise, you can tweet out that the phone is down or doesn't work, and you can be angry about it or you can be upset about it. And immediately, if your whole company is wired this way, somebody from the company will reach out to you and help you solve your problem. So now it's not only an important thing for your education and digital footprint, now it's a customer service tool.
That's a really good point. I want to come back to that one, but first I want to hear from Chris on the importance of social media.
So I wish I could say my social leadership was generated out of pure enlightenment and intellect and all those kind of great things. But in fact, I was called out. It was at a time back in 2010 when a lot of the vendors were coming out with social as a new channel, right, in unified communications. And I can't remember who it was, but somebody wrote a very good article that basically looked at some of the top leaders across the UC players and said, what kind of social footprint do they have, right? And there was an awful lot of zeros across the board. And I think I was in the not quite leaders category, but the sort of up and comers. And I had a grand total of 5 tweets at the time, right? So it wasn't kind of altruism. It was my competitive nature that got me to sort of jump on the bandwagon. And what I would say is, I could echo everything that they said, but one thing that kind of starts to cross in here as well is the interesting thing about social is that and it's an analogy in some ways for the whole UC business, is we've often looked at this as a tool. And we've often looked at this as a way of kind of suddenly, okay, we can give people reach and they can connect and whatnot. But we forgot that it often changes the way businesses operate, right? That there are new business processes that get adopted. And social is a great one because how many businesses tell their employees, you cannot have access to talking to your friends or family when you go home at night? Nobody does, right? But a lot of businesses still restrict them on social media. They somehow think that, well, if they get on social media, these rabbles, these crazy people are going to start, posting all kinds of nasty pictures that are business and all that. But they can do that on their personal time too, and it has just as much impact. So what the businesses are sort of looking at, and I think John Awada was the one, the CMO of IBM, who kind of talked to me about this and said, look, I have to trust that my employees, are going to act the same way in the same professional manner that they do 24 hours a day, whether they're on social media, the telephone, or meeting somebody in person. And so my job is to enable them, not to police them. And my job is to make sure that as we start to adopt new business practices, so at Interisys, which was part of Unify at the time, now part of Extreme, the networking side, we actually started to do cool things like human-to-machine interface through Twitter, right? So you can the administration of the network, right, through a tweet, and that kind of thing. Those all of a sudden raise all kinds of new questions, which harken back.
I remember that. That was I landed at this airport, and you changed the phone status, and you did all these things based on that tweet.
I'm going to open up the network, sort of priority, or change it or shut it down or whatever based on what I'm sort of seeing. And the reason, there's a lot of reasons we did that, but it actually echoes back to the days of ERP and CRM when these were considered tools, but then all of a sudden you had massive service arms which are coming in and redesigning the way businesses operate. When unified communications figures out how to mimic natural communication, we won't have to do that. But today, it's augmenting it, it's changing it, not mimicking it. And that's why you're also seeing the shift towards service.
That's an excellent point. Now, I want to get back to what Andy said about the importance of customer service. I just had a call. I tweeted it as proof point. I called Marriott to change a reservation, and it took 10 minutes. I watched them on the phone, the phone timer. It took 10 minutes. The guy had to get a supervisor. It's ridiculous. So, of course, I tweeted, this is ridiculous. This is bad. It's not a hard thing to change. I was just changing it from a 3-day to a 2-day reservation. And so to Andy's point, back to Andy here, there was an article I recently saw that said, social media is too important to be left to marketing. And you said, it's customer service. So is the customer service element, solving customer problems, solving customer gripes, is that a marketing function? Where does this fall into the organization?
That's a great question, Dave. As I said before, the collaboration of, or in my terms, the engagement of all these different departments in a company to the customer's benefit has got to change. It can't just be customer service over here and sales over here and marketing over here and finance over here and technology over here. There has to be, I think, teams of people that are geared towards the customer's benefit, and they have to be multidisciplined teams. So I would predict that in the next 5 or 10 years, maybe not quite 10, we're going to start to see the structure of companies shift so that there are cross-discipline teams working against target customer segments, as opposed to marketing does this, sales does that, technology does this.
And Martyn, you drove a pretty major revolution at Mitel about social media. I mean, you really drove that to happen. Did people come back to you and say, this is a marketing function, I don't want to do it, or that you shouldn't be doing it because you're in marketing? Do these silos exist for you there?
Oh yeah, typically in companies that Chris made a very, very valid point, and that was that people build their social programs around the minority, not the majority of people. Majority of people will do good things 99.9% of the time. And we did that. So I didn't drive it. The employees at Mitel drove it, as the employees at Cisco Jasper are driving our social program, because they want to be part of growing the brand. They want to be associated with the brand. They want to help customers. And going to Andy's point, it's less about customer service. That new CMO has got to own customer experience, and that's through every single touch point. That's ensuring that everyone delivers that consistent brand promise through every aspect of the business. And what you experience with Marriott is that golden congruence, where they're probably saying your business is important to us, yet the people on the front line, the most important people with the communications, the most important asset, you, the customer, are unempowered, and they've got golden congruence to get you resolved off the phone versus your problem solved. So there's a lot of things going on, but I firmly believe the new CMO has to own user experience, period.
Okay. All right. But before this conversation, I tweeted out a few days ago, or maybe it was last week, that I was going to be talking to some former UC CMOs. What should I ask? And I got some interesting responses back. This is a great question for ex-UC CMOs, as current CMOs would never answer it honestly. Current UC CMOs would never answer it honestly. So the question is, do you ever feel dishonest? Do you ever feel guilty about misleading about productivity claims, about innovation claims, that these solutions will make your organization more agile? Is there ever an element of dishonesty or guilt associated with marketing in UC? It's a loaded question, so I'll go ahead and throw it to Chris first.
No, I never felt any, I didn't have to go home and take a shower, or I wasn't lying or anything like that. I think the reality is, what you often see is, and we talked about this earlier, is the frustration and trouble and difficulty and complexity even that marketers have in articulating exactly what the value is. And so we come out from different angles, right? And there are, I don't think anybody's trying to do anything malicious. You can prove 30% savings. You can, show productivity of teams. You can do all these kinds of things. It's just frustrating because sometimes that's not really what the value is, and every customer doesn't sort of get it. It's a complex value proposition that has porous borders in its market, and so it's difficult to kind of define where your space is. I don't think it's like you feel dirty or you're lying. You're not lying. I think there's just you're trying different things, and to be honest, struggling. I mean, we struggled a lot, and we found when I was at Unify or at Siemens Enterprise Communications, we struggled a lot with hitting on the right message. When we did, it blew up. I mean, it was wildfire. We put a 3-minute video out about a concept that was in our heads that we hadn't even put sort of, finger to or code or anything like that, and took the industry by storm for a while, right? Because we sort of hit on something.
The Amazon storefront?
No, it was the Ansible, right? We put the storefront got you excited, but the Ansible was sort of got everybody kind of fired up, and we were genuine in our we thought when we would be able to deliver it, and we had pieces of it and all that kind of stuff. And I think, as everybody expected, it took Unify a little longer to deliver and are still struggling with it. But no, I don't think there's anything dirty about it. I think it's no more, no less. I mean, I was in the software business for a long time, and we were basically, we were positioning things that didn't exist because it was software, right? It was an idea, basically religious warfare. And so,
how about you, Martyn? Did you ever feel any dishonesty or misrepresentation going on in this? In not necessarily that you were doing this, but in the industry, or that the marketing claims may not be quite legitimate?
No, I think I'm with Chris. I think there's so many checks and balances today in terms of, particularly as the three of us were executive members of publicly traded companies. All the checks and balances are there. Number one, you've got to have integrity, otherwise you'll probably never step inside some of these brands. Number two is you've got a great legal team that every claim that we made, we had to back it up with fact and data from the customer and all channels. So I think the checks and balances there. I think the snake oil salespeople are probably, they're not gone. There may be some people you don't have legislature over, either people in your channel sometimes may stretch some of the claims. And when we found those people, it will be a great coaching opportunity. So no, I don't feel it was disingenuous, and I think that I think it's more or less the same. We're all members of publicly traded companies. We all had integrity, otherwise we'd end up in jail.
Okay, Andy, did you feel as you came into UC from the outside, and did you ever feel the industry was kind of shady?
No, definitely not. But I do think that it's challenging because you basically have a relatively commoditized thing going on here, and people are trying to differentiate. And so they try to poke at every little uptick in whether it's productivity or speed or whatever it is. And which is why at Avaya, what we tried to do was to move the argument away from those little benefits and onto something about a value. How is this going to increase the value of your company if you have people engaged using this technology? So we tried to stay away from productivity claims or speed claims or any of that stuff.
The classic one is the video conferencing industry who said, you'll save tons of money on travel, and then people would buy this stuff and find out they didn't really save that much money on travel. But that doesn't necessarily mean the claim was wrong, right? I mean, the claim was right. You could save a lot of money on travel. You
could.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to wrap up here with just a few more. Let me ask you advice to existing and newcomers in the marketing roles in UC. What do you feel is working? What do you feel needs to change in the industry? Andy.
I'm going to sound like a broken record on this, but what has to change is all the departments inside of a company have to work together for the benefit of the customer. It has to be a unified team with cross disciplines working to the benefit of the customer.
Martyn?
Yeah, I would echo that. I think everyone's got to really put the customer in the center of the business, and it's such a almost passé word to say now. But so how many times we've all been in meetings where the C word, customer, hasn't been iterated, and moreover, marketeers do not spend enough time going to Gemba, the point of impact on the front line with the customers, and that would be the biggest thing I'd say from an internal perspective. And then also delivering the promise of UC. Help me get my meeting to start on time, not 10 minutes late. That's the nirvana of UC. I don't think it's there. I think some vendors are getting very close, but that will be the nirvana for UC right now.
Chris?
Well, the most interesting thing about the market to some degree is there's a universal need for it. I mean, there isn't a single customer that doesn't need communications, right? And doesn't want this kind of all pulled together. So the first thing is celebrate, because you can talk to anybody, right? There's every customer, every company, every individual out there is interested in it. And then, I echo what Martyn and Andy have sort of said, just add a couple of things. One is market using the stuff that you have, right? There's nothing more powerful than a living reference. So instead of just talking about the benefits of it, use it, right? Use it internally, market through it, market using these pieces. And then second is, as we've all just been talking about, is don't just focus on the customer as in customer service. Turn around and sit in the customer's shoes and look from their perspective. It's amazing how things look differently. And when you do that, then you can tap into all the value that you want, and all of a sudden you can prioritize the claims and all those kind of things. So market what you have, using what you have, and really look from the customer's perspective are the two lessons I'd suggest.
Okay, last question. In your current roles and places where you work, do you have and use a hard phone, a UC client, a mobile client? What the UC value prop? Where are we? Martyn.
Dave, I mean, you put the golf ball on the tee for me to drive it down the fairway here. Being at Cisco Jasper, we've got everything here. I mean, actually joking aside.
Okay, I want you to answer that from Jasper. You were at Jasper before you got acquired, so answer that from Jasper.
Yeah, joking aside. We were a WebEx super user before we got acquired by Cisco. I have a hard phone, in the office phone. It's rung 4 times. I don't know my office phone number. I use a soft phone, cell phone, and WebEx. I like a power user. And now that we've been part of Cisco, I use Spark, and that's been a revelation to me as well. So that's how we communicate here internally. And yes, we use it.
Okay, very, very interesting. And Andy, you're in a small company, and so let's hear your experience, your current setup.
Like you, Dave, because I do have a small company, we use a lot of freemium stuff. We use everything is on the mobile phone. We don't have any desktop phones at all. If we're going to do video conferencing, we either use Google Hangouts, or we use Zoom, or we use Skype. It's all about the free and the cloud.
Okay. Yep. And Chris?
So in a sort of a more industrial, construction-oriented company, but a Fortune 500, I have all the tools. We have all the technology infrastructure we need. Now, whether everybody uses them is a different question. But for us, it's less about the office worker, and it's more about the branches, the stores, the drivers, right? We're sort of giving them the tools is one thing, but making sure they're not texting while they're driving, right? Or the telematics and all that. So the tools are all available. What we're working on is how we best leverage them, not just for internal purposes, but for doing what we do better.
All right. Very good. Well, with that, I want to thank my illustrious, incredible panel put together here for this. It's been fantastic conversation, and I'm sure many people will enjoy viewing this video. So again, thank you very much, and I hope to be in touch with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, guys.